if you're a first-time entrepreneur, I think taking money is the worst thing you can do. You're so much more dumb when you have a lot of money. I cherry-picked the things that didn't go right because it's really the only place to find lessons. Listen, people being mad at Dodge shows you how fucking low people's IQ is. Attention is, in my opinion, the ultimate currency. You can take attention and you can turn it into influence, you can turn it into audience, you can turn it into money. I made like 25, 30 grand when I was 9. The main reason somebody can't go to 8 figures is they enjoy the feeling of significance.
Scott Oldford, it is good to see you, my man. Thank you so much for carving out some time.
Absolutely. Good to be here, man.
So you have a bizarre, interesting story that we could go down a bunch of rabbit holes with, but
Sure.
A couple bullet points. You made your first million at 16.
Yep.
You racked up a shitload of debt after that.
Yep.
And today you have invested in a whole bunch of companies and the portfolio is eclipsing 100 million a year in revenue. We crossed paths because I invested in the company that you have recently. And I want to talk about that. But first and foremost, you've bootstrapped things and now you're raising money for different things. Quick question. When should an entrepreneur bootstrap and when should they raise money?
I don't know if that was quick, but I would say that's a whole podcast episode. I didn't raise a single dollar really until 2022. Okay. So I went my whole real entrepreneurial career where the most in terms of money I took is someone partnering with me, and part of them partnering was them putting in money, but not like, hey, give me $500,000 and, I'll send you money back when it works. Or, whatever it might be. And so I would tell you that I would recommend any entrepreneur not using money from investors until they've got at least maybe one success, and try to scale down what you're trying to go after. So like, if you're a first time entrepreneur and you're like, I want to create $100 million company, it's like, man, maybe you should create like a $5 million company first, or like a $10 million company first. And the reason is that, and one of my very first mentors when I was 18-ish years old, I went to him because I had, a big $1 billion idea and it was a great idea. And I went to him and he said, Scott, he's like, I love you. He's like, you're great. You're awesome. I love mentoring you. I love being around you. You get so much energy. But until you failed, I won't invest any money. And at the time I was like, that's some dumb shit, right? That doesn't make any sense. And of course, now it makes a lot of sense because you're so much more dumb when you have a lot of money than when you don't have a lot of money. And so like earlier on, money makes it so that things that are problems are not evident. And of course, later on, once you have a business model, once things are good, money is obviously the amplifier. But money amplifies both sides. So like your lack of understanding, your lack of knowledge, your lack of experience really shows. And so this is why when I invest in companies, I draw out the money over time versus giving it to them all at once. And so because, I've seen what happens when someone does an investment round, meaning I've been in the company advising the entrepreneur when they do like a $20 million investment round and they just go bonkers. They go from famine to feast and they're starting to spend, 60 grand on t-shirts. And so, I think there's a lot of persistence, consistency, determination that not having money gives you that I think is needed to be able to be like a steward of someone else's money. And it builds a level of self-trust versus just competent incompetence or confident incompetence. And so that's what I'd say. And then if you're a first-time entrepreneur, I think taking money is the worst thing you can do. I think, hey, it might work, but your next thing's probably going to be a big failure unless you were able to take a lot of money from it. And so, so I'd probably stay away from raising money. And I'd also stay away from raising money where you're like, yes, I'm raising money, but like if I need to buy out every single one of my investors for anything I'm doing, 18 months and I'm done. Right? Most people are when they take money, like they now have a boss.
Right.
Whether or not whether or not someone adheres to that, you have a boss. And so what I like is like I have a threshold of like, you know what? I won't raise anything more than this unless my net worth is this. Because I basically don't want to create a scenario where I can't leverage myself out of the situation where if I get an investor that ends up being a little crazy or, whatever it might be. And I never want to be in this case where anybody could ever say I gave Scott money and I didn't get it back, or I didn't have a good experience. Like I never want that to be the case. And so that makes it so I can't go and say, oh, let me raise $100 million, because that's not where I am. And that might be a limiting belief. I'm sure I talked to lots of people and they do not have that. But for me, like my reputation matters more than my integrity and reputation matters more than, let's 100x something.
You're right. That was not a quick question. But here's the thing.
No.
Here's the thing. Like you said a whole bunch of different things in there that I think are relevant, and they're also relevant at different points in the journey.
Yep.
Right. So when you're new, the most important thing that you can do probably is build your own skill sets. And I think what you said is, if you have a lot of money, you can sort of mask problems without really working through them. You can throw more money at it, but never really learn the lesson. And it might just end up working because you threw money at it, but it doesn't mean you actually solved the problem.
And the lesson will probably, not always, but the lesson will probably come later, and it will be more painful than it was when it was a small problem. Because it can mask a problem that festers and, turns into something much, much, much larger. Having money to solve problems, obviously, that's part of business. But earlier on, sub a couple million a year, it's very, very, very important that you get good at actually solving the problem versus just bypassing the problem, which is what I see most people do. And then it just comes back up 3 years later, or when you go to exit, they're like, oh, we didn't really solve this problem. And now your valuation is tanked, and, all these different types of things that happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think, the other thing that's really interesting, and you mentioned maybe it being a limiting belief, but I think it's inevitable that when unless you're, a sociopath, when you take on money, you feel some sense of obligation to the people that gave you money. You do. And it changes the way that you approach things. It changes your risk tolerance, and it changes your behavior. You also have people often when you take money in your ear. And some people or some investors are more actively trying to guide you than others. And it depends on what kind of money you take, right? And how you raise money. But I'm very much with you in this absolute rebellion of authority where I don't want to listen to anybody.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Well, and I mean, all the money I've raised have been either a good friend, someone I've mentored, or someone that I've worked with in business that referred some, which is obviously how we got more deeply connected outside of just being random Facebook friends. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's my comfort level. And I also think there's a comfort level where it's let's say it all goes to shit, right? The way I look at it is, okay, if it all goes to shit, if I'm taking money from people that, number one, if it lost it, it's not the end of the world. We're not talking about some, consumer investor, right? So then the second part is, can I go and help them with something that makes back that money or even more money? If absolutely everything went to shit, if everything went down, and that to me is my litmus test for personally taking money. And that may not be necessarily the right way to go about it, but I think that's just how I'm wired. That's just my belief system. And I've met people that honestly do not care about who, as long as they have the money, they literally don't care, and they don't care about the person. And to those people, I don't understand that. They arguably get growth faster, but they generally don't end up being liked. They generally don't end up being people you want to be around. And to me, it's I want to one of the things that I've really enjoyed from having investors is I become closer and build friendships with people that I probably wouldn't have because everyone that I'm investing isn't really giving me advice. Mm-hmm. They're really more along the line. I might ask them for advice on this or that or whatever, or an introduction or whatever it might be. But some of my best friends over the last few years, 5 years if you include business partnerships and partially acquiring businesses or that's where all my friends have come from. And as long as you can kind of skirt the relationship and not kind of think about and ensure the power dynamic is right. For me, some of my best friends have started someone referring and, hey, let me toss $100,000 into this thing you're acquiring or whatever. So yeah, it's been, I didn't expect that to be the case, but it's been really that case.
Well, so that brings up the next point here, which is there are a million ways to raise money. And, there's the full sort of Silicon Valley approach of, multiple rounds, big money, smart money, getting guidance through it, big name firms doing it. And that's, equity and diluting your own shares in the company to give it to other people. Recently, I gave you some money for something you're doing, and it was debt. And said another way for people that don't get that is, you just borrowed money from me, basically.
Correct. Absolutely.
And it was super simple, and it was a one-page agreement. Tell me how you approach raising money now and why you do it this way.
So I do it that way for a few reasons. Number one, as you said, it's very simple. I don't have someone, if I go to somebody and I'm like, hey, equity, as soon as I say, hey, equity, it's going to be a 3 to 6 month conversation, right? Because they want to know what they're getting themselves in. Because for all intents and purposes, most of the time when you buy equity in a business, you're never going to see $1 of that until it sells. And the chances of a business selling at a good multiple is statistically pretty low. Even though I might be a maverick at scaling businesses, it might statistically pretty low. The second part is it gives me a lot of flexibility, right? Like, let's say, all the businesses I'm in, some are going to be losers, some are going to be winners, some are going to be a jackpot. And so it gives me some ability to have a little bit more control. If this isn't going good, I have the ability to, it's a starting point to build trust, to be like, hey, do you want to come in on this other business in equity after you've seen kind of how I'm managing things? Do you want to put in more into this business or that business or whatever it might be? I think there's that. And then I do, like, majority of the businesses where I'm the majority owner, I control almost always over 90% of the actual direction of the company, the equity, and these different types of things. Now, there's obviously some downsides to that. The downside is I've got to be confident enough to say, yeah, I'm happy, putting my own name on the line to be able to make it work. And that's, of course, why most people don't do it. Right. And of course, the dirty truth is you're kind of putting your name on the line anyways. So, like, it doesn't really matter. People get all kind of like up in arms about a personal guarantee. It's like, hey, you give me money, I'm going to give you money back. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to live in reality. If something goes completely wrong, it might be different than we thought it was. But that is the absolute worst case scenario. And so I like that. And I also think that it's really cheap money. Because if you're confident about a business, and I'm paying, generally speaking, 15 to 20% interest, and I'm only paying interest, and I'm not paying back the principal until 3 or 4 years into the future, which is generally how I do these deals, which is anywhere from 3 to 5 years into the future, I give back the principal. There's probably a grace period at the beginning, and then there's interest payments on a monthly basis. Well, I don't have to go to a bank. I don't have to raise money. It's very, very simple to be able to do. It's essentially hard money for business growth. And as long as I'm in a business and I have the business is structured well enough, and I'm not going into a business where I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work at all or not, but it's something where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think the worst case scenario, if I sold this business, I could pay back all this money and then some. And that's the only time, obviously, I do that. Or if I'm in a growth phase and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm getting 4 to 1 ROAS, but I don't have enough money. And like one of the problems with building a portfolio the way I have it is it's not big enough to go to like JP Morgan and get a line of credit, right? It's not big enough to get somebody to underwrite it, and eventually it will. But until then, it's like my real options are, either debt that's structured like that, or to go and get a fund to kind of, overview it and so on. But what I like about this is, like, it allows me to have all these relationships and all these people that are basically silently rooting for me and helping me without me really having to do anything extra besides take their money.
Yeah.
And that, to me, has helped me so much over the last 3 or 4, since I've started doing this in 2022. And so there's that. And to, also say, majority of the deals and majority of things that I'm in my portfolio, I don't have a majority ownership. I actually stay more to under 25% ownership in something. And when I do, let's say debt on that, I'm actually helping the entrepreneur in that business raise the debt to apply that money to generally growth. So to transition the question to a portfolio, I'd say 25% I fully own, 75% I'm an under 25% owner. And I do that because there's only so many businesses you can own and kind of think about outside of just advising.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think you said something I liked, which was you have these people that are on your side and rooting for you. And if you have investors that and when things get tough,
Yep.
it is in their best interest to support you.
100%.
Right?
100%.
So I had recently I did a loan to a business from somebody I know, like, trust, high performer, and we had basically it was hard money. It was a 1 month term for a good chunk of cash, and every day that he was past that month was a $500 penalty per day. He was 30 days late, which is another 15 grand, right?
Sure.
But when he paid it, it didn't really make sense for me to take $15,000 out of his cash flow because I knew it would hurt his business to do that.
Yep.
So to me, I was like, look, contractually, yeah, I could rake you over the coals for another 15 grand, but
Sure.
that's not the win-win here. What's the point? And it's because I have a vested interest in his outcome.
And I think that that's the thing about structuring like this, because obviously I've been on both sides. I've both taken money and I've also, given money in this way. And the way I structure giving money is a little bit different than the way that I generally take it, but because of the fact that I'm generally advising and mentoring someone that I'm giving money to, versus when I'm taking money, that's generally not the case. But it is a very much a relationship basis. And the way I go about this is like, is this person going to be around for the next 20, 30 years of my life? And so I had something really difficult happen in 2023. So I put in about $8 million of my own money into the company to invest and acquire. And I raised about another $8 million. And then I had another $15 million that two people signed, all four. Both of those people I've worked with, great friends. And I built the whole structure of what I was doing based upon having essentially an extra $15 million in cash. And obviously it was my mistake to until money hits a bank account, it's not real. But
that's true.
Number one, if it does not matter if there's a contract signed, okay? It only matters if the contract's signed and then the money's sent. But before the money's sent, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, that was my fault. But both people called me the same. It was July of 2023, and one his wife served in the divorce papers, and the other one got, I think, 3rd stage cancer. Thankfully, cancer's all fine. Unfortunately, they ended up, or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they're divorced now. So both of them were like, we can't do this. And at that time, if you're building a portfolio very quickly, you're going to go in the red as you're building it to be able to build the infrastructure. So I was burning like 300 G's a month, 400 G's a month in the red on this particular business. And I remember getting both phone calls. It was a Wednesday and a Thursday back to back. And, Wednesday I was like, all right, you know what? It's no problem. I got this, figure it out. And then it was like back to back. And I'm like, well, fuck, what do I do?
Uh-huh.
And so I had two choices, which was I had somebody that was willing to give $20 million, but they were an institutional investor. And I felt like I was going to sell my soul. Or I had to basically fire a bunch of people and take about 25 to 35% of where I was putting money and just shut it out. And so that's what I did. And that decision probably lost me maybe $3.5 million to do that, because we were kind of, changing directions. And looking back, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Everything's meant to be. It's fine, so on and so forth. But it was a very difficult time of, and it also taught me, at least in my current case, don't take more than $1.5 million per person. Because $1.5 million you can replace, right? You pick up the phone and be like, all right, let me get it. 15 million, at least for me in my current life, was not hey, this is going to be easy to replace.
Right.
It was like, this is not going to be easy to replace. And also the mindset element of that was very difficult. It was just all engines going this way. And then it was just a swoop. And to add into this, and I think I've shared this with you, In a normal way, it would have been fine, but I was also pouring about $300,000 to $400,000 a month into building our compound here in the Midwest. So I was like all in on the business, all in the house. And I was also took time away, and I probably scaled down my mentorship business from 6 or 7 million a year to about 3 to 3.5 to spend time on the portfolio. And it was like just like everything all at once. And obviously that taught me to just, probably a little bit better planning and also just a little bit more on the risk tolerance side. But, in those 2 years, I learned enough to write my next book. So,
the silver lining.
Listen, my whole life is just me screwing things up and getting out of it and then telling other people how not to do it. And then I make all my money back plus a lot more with that alone. So it's not the end of the world, but yeah, and then I would also say to, if you're going to do this, like dip your toe on a singular deal. And the worst case scenario is that the deal that we did, like I took on, a quarter of the deal size in, kind of small checks anywhere from 25 to 100 grand, for the deal. And it's like, okay, well, the asset itself is worth far more than 25% of this deal. So like worst case scenario, we pay some extra interest and we exit and, it's the end, the end of that. And in the best case scenario, it turns into, 5x this current size, and I pay you back and the other people that invest in it, and you're happy, you got interest, and I'm happy because I retained the entire equity.
Yeah, that's a fun story. When things go sideways,
dude, it went sideways, and I got to say, I never got sued by a single person. I never even not even close. It was the first time in my life where I was like, man, people really got my fucking back.
Mm.
And I never felt like, because I was always like, yeah, you know what? Everyone's got your back when you're fucking
making money.
Everyone's got your back when you got fucking $10 million in the bank and you're making a ton of money and you're fucking like killing it. Everyone got your back. Everyone's like, yeah, Scott's fucking great. And there's only a few people that I'm like, yeah, you know what? They didn't have my back, and that's fine. Nothing against them. They didn't have to. But coming out of that, I was just like, man, I feel more confident than ever that I have the right people around me.
Well, I think there are a bunch of lessons there. One is contingency planning is important, right? And well, I think that's a good lesson in general. When things go wrong, it's very common for more than one thing to go wrong at the same time.
Dude, fucking a dozen things went wrong all at the same time.
Right. And
it's usually not. Even just, if there was like only 3, would have been fine. But it was like everything that could go the way we didn't want it to go went the way we didn't want it to go.
Yep. Yeah. That's like, I think I probably say this a lot when I'm recording, but people routinely ask me, just like, random people in my life, like, oh, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, yeah, fuck off. You want me to unload about the 17 different things I have going on, and the 5 that are terrible right now, and the 12 that are good? I don't have the time to go through all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's just part of the gig.
It really is. When people are like that, I'm like, well, which part of life, which subsegment of life do you want to talk about?
Well, and like, do I really want to go that deep on any of these topics with you right now in the 7 minutes I have available? But anyway, I digress. So the other thing that I want to know here is how much, like when you look at, certainly the integrity that you have in business has a lot to do with who sticks around and how they show up when things go bad. How much does your personal brand online play into your ability to raise money when you need it?
Everything. I wouldn't be able to raise the money I raised at the rates I raised, at the deals, the deal type I raised. Like, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. Because the only real way I'd be able to do this is like go to someone that I already had like a really good relationship with, that I already worked with for years. And at the end of the day, it's just like, it both allowed me to raise the money, but it also allowed me to have a lot of flexibility when things didn't go the way I wanted it to go back and restructure a deal or restructure whatever. Because there was like this underlying trust of like, you know what, Scott's not going anywhere, and he's never gone anywhere, and I don't think he's going to try to screw me.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, part of this too is like taking money from people that, like, if you can't pay them back right away, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right. So like you should never take money from anybody where it's like they're counting on that money the day it happens, because you don't know what's going to mess up. You don't know what's going to mess up. And you that's a different level of pressure, right? There's a different level of pressure. And so when at that time I had to go back and I had to restructure some deals, which was fucking one of the hardest times of my life, honestly. Because it's just embarrassing. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, like I thought we were going this way and I need to do this. And I remember there's one particular person and that I remember very, very deeply. And I was like, hey, I need to kind of share with you what's kind of, and they were very like, they're good. They still are very good friend of mine. And in this particular case, they invested about $3 million into what I was doing. And I was like, hey, we're going to need to like restructure this. And I was like, why don't you fly out so I can show you what I think is going to happen? So he flew out. We were both in California, so not a big deal. Went for a drive, laid it kind of all out for him. And he's like, don't worry about it, man. I'm like, what do you mean don't worry about it? I don't need interest, whatever. Can you get it back to me by 2030?
Shit.
Just don't worry about it. He's like, I'm betting on you. I know this is a fucking little blip in the fucking whole thing. Don't worry about it. 10% a year, pay it back to me. If you can do 2030, awesome. If you need a bit more time, let me know. And I mean, to be clear, like I was like, going in the conversation being like, man, this is gonna suck. You know what I mean? This is gonna suck. And I wasn't like, that wasn't the outcome I was looking for by any stretch of imagination. It's really funny because after that, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later, I connected with someone and they went in on this kind of whole crypto project and made like $12 million together or something. And so I was like, okay, it all kind of works itself out. And it was, I don't think without my personal brand, that would have been as easily accessible. And I also think that like I'm a character, you know what I mean? Like I have a big vision. I have like, when people are around me, they're like, you know what, this guy's like I'm 33 now. I've done a lot for being 33. I would bet on me. Right. And I think that also comes in the equation when you're kind of doing these different types of things. And obviously I'm cherry picking the things that, there's lots of things that have gone great and right. I cherry pick the things that didn't go right because it's really the only place to find lessons.
Well, I think, and I want to jump to a time when you didn't have the social network in the background, and hit on the beginning here for a second. But you have bet on yourself many times, and I think this goes back to the first comment, which is don't take money in the beginning, figure out how to solve problems in the beginning, bootstrap, and don't just chug vodka publicly on videos.
Product placement for House 9. The best water in the world, but it does look like vodka.
Yes, it does. Well, let me ask you this: how did you make $1 million when you were 16?
Sure. So when I was not 8 or 9, I taught myself PHP, MySQL, CSS, HTML, all those things. And I was always entrepreneurial. Like my dad came home when I think I was 7 with like a dozen chickens. And then I was like, well, let's get more. And then, a couple of years later, we end up with a couple hundred chickens selling eggs to all the senior homes. And I don't know, I made like 25, 30 grand when I was 9 doing that. And so I was just like not a kid. Like I didn't really have friends. I lived in the middle of nowhere. The closest, like my school was 20 minutes drive away from me. And so I got super into Palm Pilots and like the old PDA, like before the phone.
Yeah.
And so I ended up building the largest or one of the largest online communities of Palm Pilot owners in the world. Okay. Which obviously there's not a lot of competition. And so that taught me programming. That taught me community building. It taught me marketing. We had, 30, 40,000 active users a day just talking about Palm Pilots.
Damn. What platform did you build this on? How did you build it?
Envision Powerboard. And so,
oh my God.
Yeah, so we're back in the Envision Powerboard. Really funny, actually. Last year, the owner reached out to me and it was like, "Hey, I remember you," and that was really cool. So what ended up happening is I started modifying the software, and then other people wanted the software modified, but there was no one to modify the software. Like there really weren't any programmers, and so basically, I had this arbitrage between, kind of like all these teenagers and like college students that were, into programming that didn't know any business skills, and me talking to these people that were trying to run these, communities as a business. And so, I'd be paying like a programmer $30 an hour and like billing it out at 300. And so it was like this massive arbitrage. And so, and then I built the largest, with a couple of other people that were not friends. They were just in their 40s, like business owners that were into golf. So we built the largest golf community in the world. We built the largest aquatic fish community in the world, one of the largest poker communities in the world. And through all these things, I did incredibly well. And then I went downhill, because the problem is that if you're a first time entrepreneur and it really hits, there's two types of entrepreneurs at the beginning. One, everything hits and it's just like magic. And the other where it's like you're spending 10 years eating shit and then maybe it works. And the only difference is right time, right place. And that's really the only difference. And so for me, it was just like right time, right place. And I was just obsessed about it. And I'd stay up until, 2:00 in the morning in my like bedroom, like just figuring shit out. And I was just like, I was amazed by it. A little bit ADHD, maybe a little slightly on the spectrum, a little bit on like obsessive, like, oh my God, let me figure this out. So that was 16, that was 17, that was 18. And then, how I got $1 million in debt was, I had this great idea there's all these cars around. I'm like, how many people would, if they got paid $200-$300 a month, put advertising on their car? So we built this thing called Ads on the Move. And so it was this app that you download. So this is in 2010, 2011, 2012, around there. And this is an app, and you'd scan your car, take pictures of your car, and then it would match you to other brands that were, aligned to your political values and your own values and this type of thing. And then, you'd go and get ads installed, and then you'd get basically PayPal'd each month from these companies. So we had, 40,000 cars sign up. We had all this momentum. We had the largest pizza company in Canada. We had a lottery corporation. We had both sides. I spent a lot of time on this. I put in a lot of my money, like well over $1 million. And I did have a business partner, and that business partner, his main business, his partner was trying to buy him out, and it was his family's business, and he had to raise $16 million in 60 days to do a reverse purchase. And it was the same time I was raising money from actual investors. And it's just everything that went wrong could go wrong. That's not what screwed me, though. At that point, I wasn't in debt. It was, I took the team and I tried to bring it to my marketing and programming agency. And I bled myself dry trying to
the team from where?
From that we're building Ads on the Move. So I was like, hey, this Ads on the Move thing's not going to work. I'm locked with, this is not working. Because at the same time, I still had the programming company and the marketing agency and that type of thing that I essentially built. And that's where my cash flow was coming. And it was this scenario where it's like I couldn't let go of the thing that didn't work. And I didn't want to let go of the people because I sold them a vision that they bought into. And, through being selfless, I was incredibly selfish. And, I had to fire everyone then. And then I was in a case where I was, well over $1 million in debt and in a really tough place. And I had to sell the agency for $1 to another marketing agency and to avoid bankruptcy, for pretty much how it went. So that was a painful experience. That was when this was actual vodka instead of water. It was a real tough time. And I'm glad I went through it, and I'm glad I went through it at the time I did, because I had no responsibility, and it was a great story, and I learned a lot of lessons, but it was tough. It's a lot easier to look back and be like, yeah, that was great. But, at the time it was like, I was working like 19 hours a day, trying to get out of that.
What's the biggest lesson you got from that?
As soon as you know in your heart that something's not going to work, cut it. Because your ego is going to try to overpower the truth that is true.
How do you reconcile that with something being difficult and pushing through until it works?
I think you got to be like, all right, you got to set something. You got to set like a number that you're like, okay, I'm going to wait until this time. So like in 2015, I started another marketing agency that did really well. So I went to this marketing agency, sold it for $1. I was supposed to stay there for 3 years. I stayed there for 9 months because I'm not good getting told what to do. It's the only time that anyone has ever been able to tell me what to do in my entire entrepreneurial career, and it fucking sucked. And so I went and I broke that contract, which is also very stressful. And so I went and did this other marketing agency. And then one day in 2015, someone was like, "Hey, can you teach me this online marketing stuff?" And I'm like, "I'm fucking gonna teach you this stuff. Like, who might teach you?" And they're like, "No, seriously." I was like, "Okay." And at the same time, I had this little podcast that I had run in. I had a little Facebook group with like 1,000 people, and I posted in a Facebook group, "Hey, anybody interested in doing this?" And I had 22 people pay me $1,100 US, which I was in Canada at the time, so it was like $1,500 per person. And I was like, "You mean I don't have to do anything? I just got to show up and teach, talk to people?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm used to these big proposals and all this work and all this type of stuff." And I was like, "Man, this could be it. This could be like the next thing." And then I was like, "Okay, if I sell, I think it was like 200 of these. I think it was April. So it was April 2020 or 2015, so 10 years ago. If I think it was 150 people buy by the end of the year, like I could get by with my limited lifestyle, and I could get rid of having this agency thing, which anyone that runs an agency knows you may make a lot of money, but it's the most stressful business there might be." And so I did that, and 60 days later, I got 150. And I was like, "All right, sweet." And then I went into this thing, and then obviously that was the start of my personal brand. Like that was the starting point. That was the moment where I was like, I didn't even know I was trying to build a personal brand. Like, it was just like, okay, well, hey, I'm the one selling this. It's just, people like my story, and people like the experience I had. And, just so happens I was doing a lot of online marketing and running ads for pretty decent sized companies.
The other major lesson that I think is worth taking away there is you said, I was doing something that I thought was selfless, but it ended up being really selfish. And I think it's super important for people to remember, specifically early on, but through all journeys of entrepreneurship, if you don't take care of the company cannot take care of the staff, and it cannot take care of you. And so truly, the company has to come first, and you have to have the difficult conversations. You have to make the tough choices, or the company won't be healthy enough to do the other things, which ironically is the crux of people being all fucking up in arms about Doge right now. They're like, good people are getting fired, like they're doing their job well and they didn't do anything wrong. And it's like, yeah, motherfucker, but the business will go bankrupt, and it won't be able to support anybody in the future.
Someone's just, listen, people being mad at Dodge just shows you how fucking low people's IQ is, because like you're just a fucking idiot if you don't think that. And I don't care. Like, I don't care if it's Trump or Elon.
Doesn't matter who it is.
Forget that part. Like that part, I like whatever. Whoever does it, does it. That part doesn't matter. But it's like, if you don't think, if you don't think the government is overstaffed and absolutely doing nothing, there's not. You're living in a delusional life, a delusional world. Just like most businesses are completely overstaffed, and
right.
Most businesses
big
are,
ones.
One of the businesses I'm really working on right now is onlinebusinessowner.com, and most of our clients are now, most people I'm used to working with, mentoring people, doing less than 10 million a year. And most of our larger clientele is over 8 figures. And currently, because we're really still at the startup stage of that business, I'm the one doing pretty much all the business development and so on. And I'll see these, it's been fascinating, because the last time I've done this was really 2014, 2015. That's the last time I worked with 8 and 9 figure companies and even $1 billion companies. And, you'll get a text thread and there'll be like fucking 9 people on it. And I'm like, man, yeah, this company's profit margin sucks. Right? Like instantaneously, I'm like, if there needs to be this many people on a text thread, there's way too many people in this company, and they don't know how to communicate.
Mm.
And you can tell the company that is a real tight ship with probably pretty good profit margins, versus the business that it probably is mostly doing well because they've got a moat around their industry. And they probably have 30-50% more team than they actually need. And I think they're going to see with AI. I think you're going to see so many jobs transitioned because it's like, well, why the fuck are you around? What are you doing? What have you been doing recently?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, because if people don't have some purpose and something that they actually feel good about, they're going to be depressed. Easiest way to be depressed: don't wake up and not know what to do today.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And or don't produce something and produce value for who you're supposed to be producing value for.
Exactly. I'm all for Dodge and outside of the fact that I also own a little bit of cryptocurrency on that one, but the actual Dodge cryptocurrency. It's efficiency, and I love the fact that we're living into a world where we're starting to really value optimization and efficiency, and that.
Inevitable. I think AI is really the catalyst there. And the irony of the whole political side of this is, and I won't go deep into the politics of it, but
sure.
Clinton and Gore were pushing the exact same message decades ago.
Same thing.
And you can go Google videos of Elon back to back with Clinton and Gore, and the messages are almost indistinguishable.
Identical.
It's hilarious.
Because, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you can't keep you at some point you can't just keep the money printer going burr. You know what I mean?
Well, there will be ramifications.
There's ramifications. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Well, one of the things that I like in life and in business are frameworks, and I think that it's less important that you have a perfect framework than it is that you have a framework, and you have a couple that I think are useful and helpful. I want to talk about specifically. You've got a 6-pillar framework, which is marketing, sales, operations, finance, mindset, and delivery.
Yep.
For entrepreneurs that are multi-7-figure or beyond,
yep.
What do you see people neglecting the most, and why do you think that is?
Well, before it's 3 million, generally the biggest driver of your growth is going to be marketing and sales. And generally the biggest issues with marketing and sales is that the company is going to rely on 1 or 2 traffic sources only, and they don't spend enough time and resource. So it's like, let's say Facebook ads work when you're at 1 million, okay? So, and let's say we just say, hey, let's just keep scaling Facebook ads. And so you go from 1 million to 3 million, okay? And so then let's say your Facebook ad account gets banned the next day, and you're at 3 million.
Or your ads stop working.
Or your ads stop working, whatever it might be. Well, the problem is that you chose fast growth instead of stable growth. And so you got a lot of people at scale. And I'm one of those people. This is why I learned this firsthand back in 2017. So you chose fast growth, because I went from 500,000 to 3 million to 7 million in the span of the end of 2015 to 2017 until, I made $7 million between January 2017 to when did I blow up the business? September. Okay. So 9 months. And so I went very quick, very, very, very quick upward. And then my ad account got shut down, and then I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I just, I've got some, let me go travel the world and figure out what I actually want to do. So from that lesson, from obviously seeing lots of businesses, is like, at the time where, let's say you're spending $500 a day on Facebook ads. All right. So instead of going and saying, hey, let's go to 1,000, it's like, all right, let's go get $200 and start using YouTube and see if that works. All right, let's get this work. And that's going to slow your growth because you're diversifying your traffic.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you fast forward in 3 years, you versus the other company is going to be much more stable, way easier to exit. Because I mean, when you go to exit and you're like, I have 1 traffic source, it's like, well, your business is in a dumpster fire. You just don't know it yet, and the valuation is going to reflect that. So up to that point, that's the piece around marketing sales. But the entire framework, and I talk about this in The Nuclear Effect, which is my book from 2020, and you can get it for free or get it on Amazon, The Nuclear Effect. And it's simply this, which is, I'll bring the 300 pages down to 1 minute. If you just simply, on a weekly and monthly basis, write out marketing, sales, operations, team, delivery, finance, and mindset. 7, but I'm adding the pieces in between here. And you just list every single one of your problems, and then decide which ones you're actually going to solve, and then have your main leadership team also doing this and also bringing you the problems that you don't even know about. Your ability to actually grow and be a better business is going to be so much easier, because all a business is solving problems, but the problem is the awareness of the problem. And so if you don't have the awareness, or you're not paying attention to the problem, or you're putting off it, or you're too greedy for growth, and because you want a business that has times of high growth and stability versus this kind of like fully upward curve. And so after a time of scale, you want a time of stability where you're probably not going to grow, but that's the time when you put cash in the bank. That's the time when you actually get things stable, when you build more culture, and these types of things. And so most businesses are just like in this reactive state. They're never, and the most of thinking about it is quarterly. Most businesses yearly. And so all their problems are right in front of them. They are either not paying attention to them, or your team isn't telling you what the actual problems are. So the easiest exercise is each month, whoever is kind of leading the company, hey, all the problems that we have, all the problems that put them in a spreadsheet, send them to me. And then you get a master spreadsheet and you go through it as a team. All right, what problems do we actually need to solve right now? What are we going to do in the next 90 days? What ones are we going to worry about later? Easiest exercise you could ever do. And it solves almost every problem, because once you have awareness, you can pay attention. And once you pay attention, you're able to transfer your energy, money, time, resources into actually solving a problem. And pretty much all businesses, you're solving someone else's problem, which means it creates problems, and you're getting paid for being able to solve problems. That's really all it comes down to.
I like it. One of the things that I see, myself do all the time, and tons and tons and tons of other people, is first off, the self-awareness part of problems is super important. The other, though, is you can identify that you have a big problem and consistently distract yourself with little less important problems on a daily basis. And this is sort of the, allowing yourself to be reactive and live in a place of urgent and important, as opposed to staying out of the urgent quadrant altogether. Right.
Yep.
And that's probably the most common thing that I see with, let's call it multi-million, or even it's usually like up to 8 figures or around. I see people living in that space all the time. And that stability phase, these in between stability phases often come with overstaffing, where you've got, hey, let me add some people so that I can get some things off my plate, buy myself some time, stabilize. And you mentioned it could be that you don't do that and you just take money off the table, or it's that you staff up and you figure out how to retool things.
And I think another part to add into this is, I think the mindset, like, a lot of people hire, a lot of CEOs, especially under 8 figures, they hire people to solve problems, right? Which partially you do. But a lot of people, they hire people to try to get over the feeling of overwhelm. Okay? And overwhelm to me is not trusting that I'm in the right time and the right place. And overwhelm generally comes from making decisions that are not the right ones. And then overwhelm comes from having to deal with things that you should have said no to, or you should have said yes to. And so a lot of the times, people don't need to hire more people. They need to deal with the emotional tax and or reframing the mindset of what overwhelm is. So that, or simply saying, you know what, we're not going to grow from 3 to 5 million right now because I got this other shit going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times overwhelm comes from somebody being too over caffeinated, too in their ego, too on stimulants, and saying yes to a bunch of shit you shouldn't have said yes to, just for growing for the sake of growing, when you can very much grow a little bit slower, have way more profit margin, and have a way less stress. And also, like, I just feel like most people's stress tolerance is so fucking low. And I think part of that is, like, I've been doing this for fucking a long time, and I've had so much shit that has happened to me that I'm like, I just wake up. I think most people have a heart attack by the time that the 8 a.m. if they lived my life, and I'm just like, that's just another fucking day. And there's been times where it's like been too much, and I'm like, okay, well, that I said yes to that, and I shouldn't have, whatever. And so I think it's this perspective thing of like, hey, am I really going to care about this 3 years from now? No, well, maybe I shouldn't be overwhelmed with it. And so I see so many people try to buy their way out of overwhelm And the crazy thing is, you can't buy your way out of it, because it's a feeling that's in the body, and it's anxiety that's in the body, that if you don't actually figure out what to do with, it's just going to transfer. Now you have team. Well, now you're going to go and create chaos over in your relationship. Oh, now you're going to create chaos over here. Like, most entrepreneurs are just like addicted to cortisol, and cortisol is what we feel as overwhelm. And unless you realize that, you're just going to go around and you're going to chase the dragon for the rest of your life, trying to like not be overwhelmed, when in reality it's just a perspective of a feeling.
Yeah, it is. I think, and that's the notion of busyness as a choice.
Absolutely.
And so if you're electing to take on a bunch of shit, it's really important to be self-aware enough to realize you are electing to take on a lot of shit.
100%. You are absolutely in control of your reality. Like once you're past survival, you don't have to go from 1 million to 2 million. You do not have to do, you do not have to do this. You don't have to do this. And so many people are like it amazes me too, because it's like, you don't think that people that run multi-million-dollar businesses or eight-figure businesses are victims, but like, the victim mentality that happens sometimes is fascinating to me, where it's like, well, I got to do this, or I got to do that, or I got to be on this, and especially with people's addiction to their phone. I have people come sometimes, and I'm not addicted to my phone at all. And my belief is, if someone really needs me, they'll show up my door. And if they show up my door, it's really important. But besides that, nothing really, honestly, in my life like matters that much unless you show up my door. And so, but there's people that come here and they're just like, they're just, and I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, this person needs that. I'm like, man, you suck at being an entrepreneur, man. You suck at leadership. You gotta get your shit together. You can't be doing this. You're like, the reason you got rich is so you don't have to do that shit.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very easy to conflate what got you here with what will get you there.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. And the pattern of being hyper responsive to not be the bottleneck and to turn things out quickly is contrary to effective delegation and management.
It is very much. And of course, people like to feel important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the reason why people don't delegate, and the reason why people don't get themselves out of it, is because, we get a lot of significance from being the center of our world. And that's, of course, the main reason somebody can't go to 8 figures from multiple 7 figures is they enjoy the feeling of significance too much, to let go of the feeling of significance to be able to actually build it. It's almost like they go from multiple 7 figures to 8 figures. You got to detach your energy in a way from the business, which means that business isn't going to be, to you, on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to feel the same level of significance. And considering the fact that most entrepreneurs become an entrepreneur because of significance, it's a very difficult thing to do. Most people become an entrepreneur, and a very successful entrepreneur, because of some wound patterning early on in life, myself included, that made them so they wanted to be significant. And that's also the thing that stops you from building the business you want, because you got to let go of that if you want a real business.
I know, I'm very important.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a VIP.
All right. So to that end, at some point, you took a 6-month sabbatical and cite this as a catalyst for kind of a mindset shift and a new chapter of life. Why did you take the sabbatical, and what did you learn from it?
So there was no point in my life up until that sabbatical that I consciously chose what reality I was in. Meaning, there's no time where I was like, oh, I want to be, for all intents and purposes, an internet marketer. And even though I don't really consider myself that way, but I'm sure lots of other people do. And I wanted to be like, you know what, whatever I do next. And part of it was, okay, you know what, I got enough money to live off for a very long time. If I keep my lifestyle the same way, I could really invest it and not necessarily really need to work again. So it's like 2020 going into 2021. And so I was like, I've never not made money.
Right.
So I very intentionally was like, for 6 months, I'm going to intentionally not make money, because I want to feel what it feels like to just not be productive.
Mm.
I want to feel like what it feels like to not be needed and not to try to prove and not try to all these things that I built from a place of trying to become so valuable that someone wouldn't abandon me. Okay. Which is where the childhood, like why I was such an amazing entrepreneur. Because it's like performance means love, money means love. So let me perform and make a lot of money so I can obtain love. Which, by the way, is a real feedback loop too. So kind of one of those shitty wounds that it actually works the way that it does, even if it's not good for you. So I was like, okay, let me like figure that out. And it was not an easy 6 months by any stretch of the imagination to do that. Because it wasn't just like, hey, it was very much like a spiritual journey of like, okay, let me like look at these things that made who Scott is. And then, at the end of it, I was like, you know what? I actually kind of, and I was also like, well, what else do I want to do? And I looked into this thing and that thing. I was like, you know what? I don't really want to start over. I'm kind of like, I don't want to like go and just dedicate my time to AI or dedicate my, you get into tech. I was living in the Bay Area at the time. So I could have gotten into tech, could have done this. And I was like, I could do anything. I'm kind of enjoying my life. I'm kind of like, let me just like do what I do, but let me do it more intentional. Let me go and invest more. Let me not be the coach to multiple 7-figure entrepreneurs. Let me go and do this on, a level that I think is even better. And then at the same time, I was like, being a mentor to online businesses isn't going to be here forever because AI eventually will do what I do better than I can do. So, it has a lifespan. Which now we're really getting to see that. And yeah, so it was like this difficult but amazing time. I was the most at peace that I probably ever was, but at the same time, I was the most restless that I ever was because it was like you wake up and you're like, oh my God, like the wound is directly looking me in the face right now. The desire to self-soothe with money, right? Self-soothing by making money is what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, and it's almost like the nummy for babies and toddlers, right? It's that self-soothing. All right, well, if I make money today, I'll feel better about myself. If I make money today, I'll feel valuable. If I make money today, I feel important. And that sabbatical almost like marked this like letting go of a lot of this that happened in my childhood that made that to be. Not that I had a bad childhood, but that's just who I was.
Yeah, I could see that. Were you in a position to? I want to just double click on that a little bit because I feel like you have to be in a certain situation to disconnect for 6 months, or you just have to accept the consequences. Where were you relative to? Like I could leave my business right now for 6 months, no problem, but we won't grow at the pace that I want to grow at if I do that. Now my company will keep going and it will grow if I'm not here, just not at the pace that I want it to. Where were you at the time that allowed you to unplug for 6 months, or did you just abandon something and let it collapse?
So I didn't abandon it and let it collapse per se, but I was in a place where, so in 2019, I built an 8-figure business, did quite well, and I hated it. And the reason I hate it wasn't because it was an 8-figure business. It was because I wanted an 8-figure business to say I wanted an 8-figure, that I created an 8-figure business. So it wasn't like I want to do this thing. It just so happens I have an 8-figure business. And part of this was like I was in LA and I go to parties and there's celebrities and people make all this. I'm like, man, I gotta fucking fit in. Not a good reason to build a business, okay? Like this fucking worst reason you possibly can think of a business. So I sold part of that company. I let the other part go. And then I was like, you know what? It's just going to be me, a couple people. And in 2020, I made the most profit that I've ever made in my mentorship business in my whole life. Like it was an incredible year. Now, part of that was the amount of SBA loans and the amount of people that needed help and had very easily accessible cash to be able to do it. And it was also it's a perfect storm to do that. So like I went from, okay, I have good money to like, wow, like I don't really need to like work right now. And I have no overhead expenses. Like my overhead expenses were like 14 grand a month for my business. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to I kept paying everybody. For 6 months, I'm just going to like not do any promotions And the only calls I'm going to do are these like 5 people that, paid me $250,000 a year for the calls that they do. That's it. And so, and of course, that was a really easy scenario to do that in. And it was probably the only scenario that I'll get to do that in for probably another 4 years, like in my current trajectory. And because obviously when it's stable, you do that. But besides that, I mean, I've taken away a month here or there and completely disconnect. But a month versus 6 months, 6 months is a very long time.
It is. Feels like that anyway.
It really actually is a long time. And it's really funny because I didn't give a timeline for the sabbatical. I was just like, I'm just going to let this go. And I don't know, 5 months. Or my wife was like, are you ever going to work again? I was like, man, I don't know. Like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until I wake up. And I'm like, I'm ready to go now. And so that happened. Now, I think if I look back, and I'm only realizing this right now, the reason I've gone so hard from the end of 2021 until now and like invest probably was because it was like so much pent up energy where I was like, so was a 6 month sabbatical good? Maybe, but it also like created all this like tension of like, oh my God, I want to like build and build and build and build.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a downside there that I didn't know about.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, man. Well, I actually want to dig into OBO and newsletters and some other shit you've got going on, but we're also at time here. So where do we want to send people for Scott Oldford to learn more about you or what you have going on now?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously scottoldford.com. Got a couple of great books. One all about money that just came out recently that is truly amazing book. And then obviously onlinebusinessowner.com is what I'm paying a lot of attention to. I know we're at time, but essentially if if you're targeting online entrepreneurs and you want to be in front of them and you want probably the best lead generation platform that you've ever seen, I highly recommend checking that out, especially if you spend at least $10,000 a month on paid marketing and advertising, that type of thing. Basically solved my own problem, which we could talk about a different day. But those are kind of the main things outside of the other what feels like 1,000 things that I'm into. But yeah, those are the main things. And from scottoldford.com, you can find whatever rabbit hole you wish to go to.
Well, let's at least spend a couple minutes on the OBO thing because I don't want to leave a total cliffhanger on that. And I think it's a good framework in general and super relevant for a lot of people listening or watching.
Yeah. So back in 2020, to go back a little bit, and back in 2021, so all of the businesses I own are either in education, software, or education, with the concentration in media, education, or software. And my concentration is in media and education. And so education is generally certification programs. So not like just online courses, but an actual certification. And this is based upon my belief of where we are in the future, which is software for the most part is going to get eaten up by AI. So I'm not as bullish about software. But in hyper niches, it will make a lot of sense. Where somebody, for example, I own a SaaS for coaches. Well, a coach doing 5K a month is probably not going to figure out how to build their own coaching platform with AI. They can do it, probably won't do it. But for media specifically, I was like, by 2030, if I own the entire media, the entire attention of the entrepreneurial world, that is my best moat to make it so that anything I do works. Because attention is in my opinion, the ultimate currency. Because you can take attention and you can turn it into influence, you can turn it into audience, you can turn it into money. Right? Money is actually one of the least effective currencies. Because it's harder to turn it into other currencies. But if you have the attention, it really makes a whole lot of sense. So I start building these media properties and start acquiring them and partnering with people on them. And so the whole element of it is that you're going out to a much wider audience. So, if Easy Pay Direct goes out and, targets somebody, well, somebody has to be in the belief system. They have to know that there's a problem and a consequence. And then they need to know that there's a process and a methodology and there's a case study and someone to look to. And then they got to look at the solution and look what the vision is. So there's a whole buyer process, right? I call this the sidewalk, slow lane, fast lane. And so what I've done with media is said, hey, let's open up the whole sidewalk and build these media newsletters and podcasts and these types of things, and make it so that we're able to capture attention earlier than someone's ready to buy. And so with Online Business Owner, I said, okay, let's take the media, but let's also build a direct lead generation platform. And so there's two sides to this, which is if Brad here with EasyPay Direct wants to go in front of people and run, let's say Facebook ads. Well, if Brad runs Facebook ads, he knows about 95% of every lead that comes in probably is not going to be the right fit because they need to be at X amount of revenue. They need this type of business. They got to be able to be underwritten and so on. And so he might put out this guide on, merchant accounts or this thing or, whatever it might be. And he's going to waste majority of his money. And this came from my own life of I pretty much can only mentor somebody if they're making $50K a month minimum, like in their online business. My sweet spot is $50K a month of $500,000 a month. For like direct mentorship, advisory after that. Below that is, hey, here's the strategy, here's the framework, go figure it out yourself. And so if I spend $2 million a year on paid advertising, I lose about 1.6 million, meaning I'm wasting 1.6 million. So essentially we built a platform that an entrepreneur can go and when they're at 20K a month and they have an agency and their issues are marketing, when they come through our platform, we ask them these questions and then we pair them with newsletters, resources, trainings, guides that make sense for where they are. So if somebody comes in and they're like, hey, I'm at 100K a month and one of my biggest issues are finance and operations, probably makes a lot of sense to put EasyPay Direct in front of them. But if they come through and they're at 20K a month, and we're like, yeah, you know what? Brad's not interested in this just yet, right? And so we've basically made it a cost per lead model that is based upon someone literally saying, this is who I am, and then putting up their hand and saying, yes, I want this guide or this lead magnet, or I'm interested in this offer. So it's the first time it's ever been done, as long as I know, in this industry. The data shows the lead quality is amazing. And it's basically the main thing that I'm spending most of my time on because all my businesses are online, if I make onlinebusinessowner.com this kind of mammoth in this industry, it's going to benefit every single business in my portfolio. So I've been spending a lot of time on that and also making it so I don't have to spend any more money. I've actually stopped spending money on my personal brand now and basically replaced that ad spend on onlinebusinessowner.com. Because, and now it directs me all the leads I actually want to know. And then all the other people, they don't necessarily need to know my stuff directly.
Yeah. So let me recap that or give a kind of a succinct example of how this might work.
Sure.
So I know, for example, that you have a handful of different newsletters where you've partnered with people that have newsletters and for a variety of different verticals. But let's say, there's a company that just has a software that helps people. It's a marketing software, let's say, and they have a newsletter about marketing. When somebody registers for that newsletter, you have a pop-up that asks them 12 questions. So you've partnered with this company that does the marketing newsletter. 12 questions get asked that help segment that person that's going to join that newsletter. And you basically do a co-reg. So you're basically saying, hey, we've got 12 things that you've opted into or said you're interested in. And then you're showing them other options for things they can sign up for. And you're selling the leads. But that ends up creating a very targeted lead for all of the people. Is that a fair example?
That's a fair example. Absolutely. Yeah, fair example. So, it makes it so that we actually know who's coming through the door. And we know how to be relevant to them because, my whole market, we talked about my 6-pillar methodology, but my whole marketing methodology is based on one of the core principles is relevancy. And if we know who somebody is, we can make it so that they feel like we're the only one that gets them. And most people are most emotionally moved to buy something when they feel like somebody actually gets them. And so that's the most powerful aspect of marketing is to allow someone to say, wow, it's almost as if you're watching me. And so essentially, yeah, exactly. Super creepy. So we're essentially doing that at scale.
I dig it. Love it, man. Onlinebusinessowner.com, scottoldford.com. I will hopefully at some point when it gets warmer, come to Indiana and drink some of that vodka with you.
You're gonna be real surprised when you put it up and it actually is vodka and not water, right?
Pleasantly.
Thanks for having me on, Brad. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Until next time.
Thanks for checking out this Beyond a Million episode. It occurred to me just now that I never tell people to leave comments, and that's probably really stupid. I should tell you to leave a comment. So if you have any questions or you liked the show or you hated the show, it would be awesome if you would leave a comment. It makes a big difference in helping other people find it. Leave a comment below.